ladies and gentlemen. It's Modern Investing on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today our guests are Jim Eat from Eat Foundation. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Great to be here, Sasha. Good to see you.
And our producer, Mark Lee. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Glad to be here. How's everything going?
Okay, everything's going fine.
Yeah.
We've been here on last Wednesday, which was non market stock market was closed. Therefore, we didn't have usual joy on Wednesdays. But today, market is open, and we still don't have a lot of joy. Although yesterday was a pretty good day. So, Jim, how is your investment faring these days?
Yeah. Actually, the chip stocks that I've really been following and investing in aren't doing so well today. They're having a bad day. But NVIDIA is one of the ones that are driving that kind of market. And so when NVIDIA did its 10-for-1 split, it kind of went up and then it's come down a little bit. It's probably what we could call correction territory. But I'm still a believer in the stock going forward and in the ones that are competing with it, including the old I dusted off Intel and invested in that. And it's done pretty well for me, but it's down today. But I think that how they're reproducing themselves to enter into the AI market is good. And I think it'll pay dividends, like increase their revenue going forward. And NVIDIA just announced that they're doing some business in the Middle East now. That should increase their revenues. And there's all sorts of government restrictions in dealing with certain countries. And but if they can navigate all the red tape, I think that'll be good for them. But by and large, the tech sector isn't having a very good day. But I will say that the Dow Jones is still up, the NASDAQ is still up, and S&P it's still at record highs. It's down a little bit today, but stock markets have been performing phenomenally well, and it's only to be expected that people will start taking profit at some time. And I think the chip companies that I follow, Marvell, Taiwan Semiconductors, NVIDIA, Advanced Micro Devices, these chips, these stocks are doing well in general. And I think the people are taking some profits. That's what's happening now. That's just my opinion.
It's not only that. It's remember I've discussed quite a few times the gap theory. The NVIDIA showed tremendous and built up tremendous gap going, especially after split and their spectacular earnings report. It went. Right. If you look at their chart, it's a vertical line. It's vertical line about any profit taking, any correction or anything. It was going straight up, and it cannot go on continuously for so long period of time. I mean, so the 3 days that it had, in my opinion, healthy 15% correction, and yesterday it went up and closed almost half of what it's lost in those 3 days. Yeah. I think it shows. See, about NVIDIA, you can probably compare it to some meme stock like GameStop, for example, or so on. So the chart looks really the same, almost the same. But the fundamental difference is that NVIDIA has real earnings.
Revenue, yeah.
Revenue, incredible revenue and incredible earnings. So, and each time I'm questioning myself, okay, they had the last quarter, they had spectacular earnings. So this time, it's very difficult to beat this earnings. So what can drive stock even higher? Guess what? They beat the bottom line and the revenue and everything. Now the next report is August 22nd or so. So now I'm wondering how they can go and exceed what they've done in June, in May. Yes, they still can do it.
Just really quickly, because I was going to bring in Shaquille, because I did see Shaquille being from Australia and everything. But I did have a quick question to you, because I know that sometimes people are interested in investments, and I know that a lot of times there are people that even invest in things in their house. I know a lot of people do home improvements as a form of investment. Ironically, I was talking to my mom, and she's got a swimming pool in her lovely house and everything. So sometimes that is an investment. So I just wondering y'all's thoughts before I turn it over to the three of you fine gentlemen, and then return a phone call in that notion of investments in your property. Because like I said, mom's actually got a leak in the swimming pool.
I have an improvement on your mother ideas to build 2 swimming pools. Even bigger investment, and the people will be amazed. Oh my God, there are 2 swimming pools. Let's buy this house.
Could be an idea
Get
there.
the maintenance that requires and the liability.
Yes, that is true. Like I said, she's dealing with a leak right now. But she found out that it's taking some repairs that have to be done. But it seems like it's working out well. And of course, my nephews love going there because that's where they head to as soon as they come to the house. I'm sure that you folks that are in the same age range or some of the age range to folks that are in my family can relate to that and everything. So I'm going to turn it over to you and Shaquille and folks and return this phone call, but I may come back later on.
Yeah, okay, Mark. To answer this question, my home improvements are generally categorized under repairs. When something breaks, I fix it. And that's my idea of home improvement. No, I don't think of it in terms of an investment. The home itself, yes. The keeping your yard, looking presentable for your otherwise your neighbors might not like it. Certain things you have to continue to do to keep the home's value. And but right now I'm just amazed in the Bay Area how expensive things have gotten. The median home sale in San Mateo County, where I live, is over $2 million now. And I just can't get my head around that. But that's the median.
Well, that's what market is prepared to pay for these properties. And you just have to accept it, whether you want it or not. And Shaquille, I have a question to you. We've discussed quite a lot of the merits of investments, and your investments and your style is very sophisticated. And I think it would be very, very difficult for people to follow what you're doing, except just give their money under your management and pray.
Pretty much. G'day, Jim. Look, pretty much. But I feel these days, I don't know, I'm 40 now, so I feel like I'm getting old. I was supposed to retire 5 years ago and I was 35. So I don't know. I look at some of the investments, and I've got heaps of investors that want to invest with me. And I was saying to one of my business partners the other day, who said, "Look, we've got this guy, and he really, really wants to put in a pretty substantial sum of money." And I was like, "I don't want it. I don't want to, because I don't want all the responsibility or the regulatory headache, and I just want life to be simple." Which maybe that's selfish of me. I don't know, but that's the thing as well. I think I sort of clarified that in my mind when I was just speaking, shooting from the hip. I think I knew that I wanted to be a trader because I thought it looked so exciting when I saw it on TV. I saw and I still think it looks really exciting when you watch those guys in the pits. And they've got these colourful jackets, and they're doing all these hand signs, and I'm like, wow, that just looks amazing. That's what I want to do. To be honest with you, I don't think I'd want to do it now. I would like to have been able to walk on a floor, which I never got the opportunity to do. But I'm not really sure that that's what I'd want to do all day, every day. I think you'd get a little bit tired eventually. But I always thought and I always thought I need to learn more and more and more in order to make money, because there must be all of these really sophisticated trading techniques the big banks are using and the market makers are using, and I have to learn all of that so I can conquer the markets. And I have learned all of that. Well, not all of it, but I've learned a lot of it. And I think I'm a really good trader, and I have some pretty creative ways of structuring my trades. But I think that 90% of what I've learned and what I've spent all this time learning really didn't help me that much. So I think you can keep things relatively simple. Now, the technique that you're talking about with selling put options against NVIDIA stock.
No,
I would agree.
Covered calls.
Covered calls. And naked puts. Yeah. So they're the synthetic equivalent of each other right now. I wouldn't dream of doing something like that in and of itself like you've done, because I'd be worried about the risk concentration in one stock. But I can't argue with you because you've had really great results. So if it's working for you, keep doing it until it stops working and then move on to the next big
I
thing,
totally
right?
agree with you.
So I think what people have to do is just identify for themselves what works for them, what they're comfortable with. I'm not going to like Jim. If you guys remember, a couple of years ago, we were talking about one of the tech companies. Was it called Snowflake or something? And Jim had talked about it. It was on the day of its IPO. I am a bit shy on tech companies. It's just not my area of expertise. There's nothing wrong with them. The Nasdaq index well and truly outperforms the S&P 500 and the Dow, but it's just not my field of expertise. So Jim said, "Oh no, this stock's going to go really well." So I bought, I can't remember what it was now, but it was a fair bit of shares on the day, live on air, and then sold them before the end of the show. And I think we made was it 10 grand or something like that? Jim?
Yeah, I think that's what you told me.
I even remember the stock name. It was Snowflakes.
Snowflake, I think. Yeah,
it was very popular at the time.
But the thing is that I'm not going to, with the greatest respect to Jim, like I'm not going to base my entire portfolio on things that Jim thinks is a good idea because that's silly. And Jim's not going to base his entire portfolio on what I think is a good idea because we have different risk profiles. We're at different parts of life, and we've got different things going on. But I do think people need to pay attention. One, what they're comfortable with. Two, pay attention to your risk. What you're doing is not actually that risky if you've got the money to back it up if you get hit on the put option, or if you've got the money if the stock declines and you've got a call option against it. It's not that risky if you can afford to do that.
I like to use leverage. Money like Sasha is.
Yeah, exactly. I like to use leverage, and so I would prefer to trade that same position a slightly different way. And I would probably make a higher return, but that doesn't make any difference because I've got access to tools that a lot of people don't have access to. So that just because I can make 20% and you've only made 18%, just making up a figure, and the next person doesn't have the sophistication, they only make 15%, doesn't mean that the person making 15% shouldn't do it, right? They just maybe aren't quite as skillful as the rest of us.
I would like to mention something, Shaquille. In my opinion, it's a very different way of trading or investing, if you will, with a portfolio of $100,000, $1 million, and let's go to $100 million. So whatever works with, say, $1 million doesn't work with $100 million. And when I'm thinking about starting a hedge fund based on these selling covered calls and puts on not necessarily NVIDIA, it could be many others. Actually, when NVIDIA had a small correction last week, I've ventured, first of all, I lighted my position on NVIDIA somewhat, and I've started to investing in some other stocks, which are related, but some not. For example, I've choose Vanguard mutual, not mutual funds, it's ETF actually, and they have options as well. And then, for example, Amazon, I figured out that Amazon is sort of like building a base, and it's about to go much higher in my estimation. So I've sold some puts on Amazon. I'm making already money there, but I'm trying to explore, for example, by the way, the Micron technology, MU, I've doubled on that as well. So I'm watching some, I don't want to be in a situation where I was, say, about 40 years ago when I was young and foolish, and I made pretty good amount of money, say well over $250,000 at the time. 40 years ago, it was a substantial amount of money. There's nothing wrong with it today either. And I had no idea what I'm doing, and I started to think, okay, that's great. What to do next? Okay, I bought a large house and flipped it and made another $90,000 profit on that. So I started to think, okay, what's next? How to continue to make money if I don't know anything about trading and stocks and anything like this? And I came up with the idea. Okay, that junior company on Vancouver Stock Exchange that I made $250,000 plus, People who started that company and run this company, they must have made many times more than I did, because simply because they had many more shares than I had, and I had to pay for my shares, even 50 cents, but still, and they got most of their shares without even paying anything for them. So I started to investigate how to start this publicly traded company myself and be in the position of the people who are in charge of it and who are making all this money or so on. And 2 years later, I indeed started my own publicly traded company, and I've learned everything what to do. Nobody taught me this, how to do it, so I had to go step by step. One good thing where I started, I hired a very good security lawyer, and he really took me step by step and to how to do IPO, how to do prospectus, how to do this. So he took me over, and that really helped. And then 10 years ago, I started my second publicly traded company. Did very well with that as well, because I sold my controlling interest there and generated very good profit. So sometimes, we are talking about public education and how people have to be financially educated and so on. And I'm telling you, I was not financially educated. Nobody taught me anything. So you just go through life. I think the most important element in all that is curiosity. If you're curious enough, and if you have desire to achieve what you're trying to do, I think that helps. Big deal. Shaquille, I think that with you also, curiosity is a big part of it. It's you keep learning.
I'll respond to this second. I know Mark's got his hand up, so I'll respond to that in a minute.
Okay.
No, and actually, it's everybody here, including you, Shaquille, and everything. But one of the articles that I had recently seen was talking, because I know we're going to have, and I know this is the investment show, but tomorrow we'll have the whole debate going on. But apparently a lot of Americans are having less anxiety about the economy than a year ago. And they're saying that many Americans are comfortable investing more than they were last year this time and everything. And they're even saying that there is a lot of folks that are willing to leave their cash on the sidelines. And there's some statistics about who's willing to leave it, whether it's the millennials that are 61% and the Gen Xers that are 57% compared to the boomers that are at 48%. But they did say kind of what you just said, Sasha, that more than half of the respondents that worked with the financial professionals want to have more frequent meetings with their financial professionals. Maybe they need to have meetings with you and Shaquille and Jim and everything.
Oh, no. If you're a client of mine, well, first of all, you can't be a client of mine. But if for some reason you found out somehow, I don't know how you ever would, but if you found out that some of your money was invested with me, don't call me. I'm not going to talk to you. I don't want to know. Just go away. You've got advisors. Your advisors speak to my people. You don't talk to me. The last thing I want is to talk to my clients. I just want to say in relation to schooling and at the risk of offending the left, the right, and everybody in between, everything that's being taught in school is totally wrong. And one of the things that I noticed, and I don't want to get into a political skirmish here, but one of the things I noticed that the centre-right people do is they say that the schools are teaching all this stuff about gender and this and that. It doesn't matter. They should just simply focus on maths and English and giving the kids skills and tools to be able to be productive members of society. That sounds reasonable, but do I want my kids? Well, I don't have any, but when I have them, do I want my kids to be productive members of society? Hell no. I'm not a productive member of society because I've worked out how to trade, right? So, if I had children, I don't want them to learn how to, be a scientist or whatever. Like maybe do a little bit of computer science that you keep up to date with AI and how to use that as a tool. Learn how to trade, and then don't even bother trading. Like these days, I'm saying I'm not even sure I can be bothered. Like I'll put a few trades on because I enjoy it, and I'll just look at the returns being generated by money managers. I'll find out what their strategies are, and I can probably do better myself personally, but why bother? If I can just put the money there and just find out once a month what all of my investments are doing, then I'll just sit back and chill. So I know that probably sounds like selfish and totally like not contributing to society in any meaningful way.
That's okay, Shaquille. But
like, why do you want to teach your kids? I don't get it. Like, why do you want to teach your kids to be workers? Because somebody is making a profit out of their work.
But she kills on
So,
those
so
same lines, and I agree with you on that to some degree, because I think we sometimes teach people too much to go to work in what I consider almost in some cases a
Assembly
plantation-like
line.
environment. But my question, which I kind of was alluding to, is, are people missing the boat on this whole notion of recession and inflation? Because if I'm reading these statistics right, it's actually coming down. And Jim, you're there in California, and they're saying that it's less of a concern, even though if you hear some of the politicians talking, it's more of a concern. So I'm a little confused, because they're saying that recession was a concern of 64% of the respondents in this survey a year ago, and now it's down to 37%. And the same thing was around inflation. So are we missing the boat in terms of investments, in terms of this notion of maybe it's not as bad as we think it is?
Well, this is my hobby horse. I think the Fed kept interest rates far too low, so the money was very cheap for far too long. And now they're keeping interest rates far too high for far too long. And they need to lower the interest rates, because one of the things that we had a global pandemic that caused global-wide inflation, and it destroyed our distribution system, our economic distribution system, which has repaired itself over time. And but the prices haven't come down because companies aren't silly. They know that people will pay these prices, so they're not going to lower them. But they need as competitors. They need people to come in and produce, and these competitors need to borrow money. But right now, the borrowing money is punitive. But if the Fed would get on board and lower interest rates, as they did in Canada, as they're talking about doing in the European Union, then it would be more easy for startups to come in and compete, and that will end up lowering the prices. But on all economic fronts, and I really want to get Shaquille's take on this, because this has been something I've been saying almost every show, that the Fed needs to lower interest rates. The idea here is that, not only is the stock market at record levels, corporate earnings are at record levels, unemployment is lower than it's been in decades. And this is across the board, minorities, any kind of, slice of the pie you want to look at, unemployment is down and wages are up. So where is this bad economy? And people would keep saying, they would report the statistics where people were saying two things that seemed to me contradictory. One was the economy's heading in the wrong direction, and two, I'm doing fine. Now, everybody I'm doing fine, but the economy is heading in the wrong direction. So, what's happening, I think, is that people are starting to see, hey, the economy is doing fine. As a matter of fact, I think the Fed is trying to create an artificial recession, because their old school type of thinking is that the only way to treat inflation is to have a recession, people unemployed, and then prices come down. But that's not what happened. Global pandemic is what happened. And their old school way of thinking is not appropriate to today and what's going on in the world today. But Shaquille, I haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you. And
good to see you. Look, I can tell you what the economic issue is. The economic issue is that there's a whole heap of people running around America saying the election was stolen from us in 2020, and so nothing that Joe Biden can ever do is going to be good. Right? That's the reality, and people are buying into that. I think it's interesting because inflation rates were higher in the US for a period of time. They're now lower. I think that economists, the next generation of economists, decades from now, will be studying whether deficit spending in the US was a better idea or a worse idea when you compare the lack of deficit spending in places like Europe. What worked, what didn't, and what did the economy get better because of that, or did it not, or should it have been done differently? Well, we're not going to know that right now. That's something that I think history will tell. But yeah, I hear the reports from right-wing media saying that cost of living pressures are really high, even though there's low unemployment. That indicates to me that maybe some of the extra economic activity is not being dispersed fairly amongst everybody. But that is interesting that that's the complaint of the people on the right, because isn't that the complaint of the people on the left? So I'm not going to get involved. I'm not going to get too involved in your politics, because I can't make heads or tails off it. But look, I can certainly say for myself, because I often bet on interest rate differentials and on entire economies or parts of the economy. So, for example, because the hospitality and accommodation travel sector went down so hard during COVID, yes, I started to think that they would go up relative to some of the companies that had gone up quite well, like the tech companies. Now, thankfully, I didn't hold that position for very long. It did. Those sectors did come back. I made some good money out of it, but I was always very nervous about being short tech. So I got out, and thankfully I did what I did, because tech, as you know, has turned around and has done very well. I would like to see how Australia goes. I'd like to see what's going to happen in the UK, because their economy has just been obliterated, and I blame a lot of that on bad management by the Tories, and actually on the promises made by the Brexiteers. Right. So it'll be interesting to see what changes are made there. Europe's started to go more politically centre-right, and maybe that will be a good thing, because there has been a little bit of over-expenditure across Europe from the centre-left parties that have been in control. Politics is a pendulum. Things swing back and forth. So when things go too far one way, they tend to come back the other. I'm not too bothered by that. Is there the potential for the US to go into a recession? Look, there are a couple of risk factors that the US has to focus on, especially with its relationships internationally with Saudi Arabia and some of the other oil countries saying that they're going to start trading without using US dollars. One of the other things that I think is quite harmful to the US is that when people transact in US dollars, they are all of a sudden subject to the rules that the US places. And if I'm not in the United States and I'm trading with another country that's not in the United States, maybe I just don't want to trade with your currency, because I don't want to have to abide by some of the rules. The other thing is that 30% of the world's economy is under sanction. Well, that's not good, because all of a sudden you're going to see, people that you don't like, that you have real issues with, going out with other people that you don't like and forming alliances, and you think, this is dangerous. Right, BRICS, Putin recently was in North Korea. That's a little bit eyebrow raising, but I don't think it's doom and gloom. I think it's okay. As far as international relationships for the United States, I don't think Biden's done a great job. I don't think he's done a terrible job. A couple of things that I think he could have done a lot better, like the Afghanistan withdrawal. But Donald Trump is not exactly known for his caress, shall we say?
Yeah.
So there could be a little bit of a political wobble. Again, I say to people, just focus on. I don't want to turn everyone into selfish people, but focus on yourself. Focus on what you can control in your own life, because you can't really do very much about what government's going to do, but you can focus on what your investments are going to be. And I like to have a bit of diversification, and that means not just diversification across sectors, but I like to have a finger in a pie in as many countries as I can. And that's why I own some shares in Japan, I own some shares in South Korea, I own some shares in the UK, I own shares in Europe, etc. Because otherwise I'm just going to be too heavily concentrated in the United States.
Shakil, you reminded me, speaking about Trump, I've heard today on the news that his advisors developed a policy for the Ukraine, specifically for tomorrow's debates. So here is in short his policy on Ukraine. So he will get in touch with Vladimir Putin and Vladimir Zelensky. And he says, okay, here is what we are going to do. Putin, okay, you stop war immediately, because if you don't, we will supply Ukraine with so much weapons that they want to take over the Moscow and St. Petersburg and all your Russia. So please listen to us. Now, to Zelensky, message will be this. Okay, you Zelensky, you stop right away any active warfare. And if you will do that, we will not stop, because if we will not do that, we will stop providing you with any weapons whatsoever. So Russians will just overcome and kill all of you and so on. Now, if you will listen to us, then we will give you as much weapons as ever possible. My question is, if Zelensky listens to Trump and stops fighting, why does he need all these promised weapons? What for?
Well, my question is, what weapons? Haven't Republicans just been telling us for the last 4 years that the Democrats have destroyed the military, that all the military now are woke and they're all transgender, and you've got pregnant women in fighter jets, and they left all the weaponry over in Afghanistan. Like, what weapons are you talking about giving to the Ukraine? You just told us that you need to be elected because the military's in disarray. The other question I've got is you're always talking about double standards. In order to get into the United States, if you're not a citizen, you get fingerprinted at the border, which I was quite like, what? I haven't done anything wrong yet. So fingerprinted when you come in. You have to declare if you've got a criminal record or a serious criminal record, like misdemeanors generally don't matter. And a lot of other countries like Australia also have the same rules, which obviously I wasn't as aware of because I'm a citizen. But a lot of countries have those rules. If you've got a criminal record, you can't come, and if you do want to come, you're going to have to get an exemption. Now, Donald Trump is likely to get an exemption for his felonies because he's the president of America or whatever. But is he then going to change some of the rules in relation to immigration in the United States that says, actually, if you've got a criminal record, you can come, which you couldn't come before? Because that's what they're saying, right? We don't want to have all these criminals come. Well, now you've got a criminal record and you think the justice system is unfair. So don't you think that the people coming from the poor countries might also have an unfair justice system by your own standard? This will be interesting. I'd love to see how this plays out.
Shaquille, he also said recently that I forgot the gentleman's last name, but the reporter from the Wall Street Journal, that as soon as he's elected, that he will go talk to Putin and that he will be freed. So he's already said that as soon as he is elected, that because he's basically told Evan, just sit tight, because as soon as, don't worry about the trial, don't worry about what's going on, because as soon as I'm elected, I'll go talk to my buddy and you'll be over here and you'll be back home. So just sit tight. Everything's gonna be all right.
I've got a very good friend of mine who is a conspiracy theorist, but when I say that, he doesn't believe in the conspiracy theories. He just is really up to date with what all the conspiracy theories are, and he just enjoys it. He thinks it's really fascinating and interesting, and like some of them you sort of go along with for a bit and go, yeah, okay, I can see it, even though it's ridiculous. Like David Icke with his reptilians, all the celebrities and politicians in the world are shape-shifting reptilians. Sounds ridiculous, but it's a bit of fun.
Yeah.
But he does actually come up with some, or he hears some and that are sort of out there that you go, oh. And one of the ones he told me recently was that the Democrats want Donald Trump to win. And I was like, why would they want him to win this election? And he said, well, they're doing everything wrong. I said, yeah, okay, the poll numbers showed that, but polls are wrong. You're not going to know till election day. And he said they want him to win because they've got some really serious issues they have to deal with in 2028 and 2032 when those Social Security trust funds and Medicare trust funds, et cetera, run out of money. And if he wins, they can blame the Republicans and they can blame Trump and they can put them out of power for decades after that. Now, I'm not buying that, but it's an interesting conspiracy theory.
Sophisticated, no, I don't get it.
They're not that sophisticated.
They haven't learned how to play chess properly yet, Jim. Is that the
Hey, Sasha, I have a quick question for you, because I know this is an investment show, and there is a very small car. I don't have a lot of money that I'm investing in at the moment, but maybe that'll change at some point. I'm working on a couple of small business deals and everything. But that being said, that small car is the Volkswagen, and they are now getting in the EV space. They're saying they're going to put $5 billion in Rivian, and apparently the stock was down, and now apparently it's back up, and it's trying to figure out what it's going to do. So should I be investing in Rivian if I get a windfall?
If you feel so good about it, please go ahead and do it. First of all, the $5 billion are not coming as one shot package.
Right.
It's only $1 billion now, and the rest of the money up to the end of 2026. Which is helpful, but they can always change their mind, and Rivian may not be even in business by that time. Who knows? So I'm somewhat skeptical on that. And what's interesting is I can't get over it that the CEO of Rivian sold a substantial amount of shares for around $10, and Rivian today is $16. So either he didn't know anything about upcoming deal, or how you can explain that? He's inside.
Well, you don't know who he sold it to. He might have had somebody else buying on the market somewhere else, especially in a more tax-friendly jurisdiction, shall we say? I'm not saying that's what he did. I'm just saying you don't know You don't know what they're thinking as the corporate executives.
Let's
They
say
always
this.
have reasons.
I'm just following on insiders sell and buy stocks. And that's what I noticed, that he sold so many shares. To whom he sold, why he sold, nobody knows. But
well, it's an important thing to track what the management is doing in companies and if they're selling and why. But the take I had on that was the investment is designed for make a lot of electronic trucks, and is there the market for that? That hasn't been proven or demonstrated to my satisfaction. So it would be a risk that I would not be willing to take.
yeah,
I think we'll get there, though. I mean, there's a lot of talk
agree.
about, for example, hydrogen-powered planes. Now, I asked a question, and everyone looked at me like I was a psycho or a lunatic, which is probably true. I am a bit of a
We do
lunatic.
that anyways.
But I asked a question. I thought it was a reasonable question. The AUKUS deal, the Australia, UK, US deal, which basically the United States is going to provide Australia with nuclear-powered submarines as part of what they're going to provide to us. And I was like, oh, nuclear-powered submarines. So, like, submarines, I would imagine, require a lot of fuel to move around through the ocean. So, like, why can't we have nuclear-powered planes? And like people were looking at me like that was the worst question I could possibly ask. I was like, but no, like there's obviously a reason, but like, what is it? And then by extension, if nuclear is so safe, well, can't we have nuclear-powered cars and trains and trucks? They all just said, well, every time there's a car accident, there's going to be a nuclear explosion. I was like,
We
did
don't
you say
want
it's really safe?
plutonium everywhere. Yeah.
and
Yeah, so
don't ride bicycles.
Well, one of my takes on this is that people seem to forget that the deficit went way up under Trump, much higher than it did under Biden. And Biden had the COVID pandemic to respond to and indulged in deficit spending, which I think even though history will be the judge, I think we can tell right now it saved a lot of people who were impoverished and were starving. And these people were given a chance to live lives of dignity. And this was a necessary thing for the United States to do, as the values of the country should show compassion to people who are suffering, and not by something that they caused themselves by this global pandemic. But the Trump was basically a tax giveaway for the wealthy, which you can argue was wise or not, but it really hit the deficit. The gap went way up, like 25%. And, this is the kind of thing, like we often do things without paying for them.
But speaking of that, and Jim, speaking of history and along those same kind of lines, I remember a time, and I'm going to date myself a little bit here, when you literally could go down anywhere in America and you could see drive-through theaters, and you still find them on occasion and everything, but they're not as prominent as they used to be. Are we going to see a time, because I've got a dear friend of mine that loves his Tesla and his wife has one as well, so they are in that EV space. Are we going to see a time where gas stations don't exist and there is actually these electronic charging stations all over the place? And will that be in my lifetime or in my nephew's lifetime, or will gas stations always be around? Because like I said,
Your nephew, Mark, your nephew, yes.
Yeah.
Your nephew lifetime.
So maybe not your lifetime, but
no. But that's
So-
the next generation.
kind of
So I just want to respond to what you said there, Jim. To criticise Biden for his economic handling of the United States and to blame it on left-wing political philosophy, you would also then have to criticise right-wing governments like Australia had at the time for doing essentially the same thing. Were the right-wing governments of Australia actually left-wing? Not at all. So I try to be careful about criticising any politician on any side of politics for what they did during the pandemic, because
I
whilst
wasn't criticizing him.
no, I know you. No, I know you weren't. I'm saying that I'm very careful about doing that, because some of the things that were done, like locking people down, I didn't like it. I think a lot of people didn't like it. But the politicians that did that did so because that's the advice they were given, and they were doing the best they could. Other politicians said, "Okay, no, we're going to stay open." Whatever the results are, whether they're good or bad, it's very difficult. But I think coming into this election, I think the reason why Joe Biden is struggling is because I don't think he is as energetic and charismatic as he once was, and I think that he looks old, and that's having an effect. Kamala Harris, I really feel for her, because in the lead up to the Democratic nominations, everyone was going on about how angry she was, and she was so stern, and she was always complaining. Then she becomes a VP, and everyone complains that she's always too happy, and she's laughing about things inappropriate. I mean, what is she supposed to do?
Absolutely.
It's difficult, but I will also apply that on the other side. I think that the candidates of centre-right parties often get picked on for things that they've said or done or mannerisms, and they're just doing their best. Again, I would try to kind of just take the position of, look, whatever I think should happen in the United States, where I'm not a citizen, or even in my own country, whatever I think should happen, I don't really have any control over it. But let's have a look at how that's going to affect our investments, and let's try to focus on our own futures and the future of our communities.
Well, we have a center left, and we have a center right, and we have moderates, but they're getting squeezed by extremists from both sides. But the GOP extremists have won the Congress. They have won. And so this is a new phenomenon in the United States, because always there were the moderates or the center right, which were totally livable, totally reasonable. Now we have extremists who are embarrassing with the things that they say. And it's not just politics as usual. It's very different.
Well, it was an impressive red wave that had them with the House of Representatives in 2022. What an amazing wave that was! But look, I do want to say this though, and I've been saying this to politicians and governments all over the Five Eyes countries that I spend the most amount of time in, and I keep saying to them, look, obviously I have some bias because I like to promote the interests of small business, right? Which is weird because I make all my money out of trading the stocks of big companies. But I like to fight for the little guy, right? And I keep saying to them that I feel like what's happened is that small business feels like they're getting squeezed by so many regulations that big companies get away with. And so what a lot of this owners of small businesses say is, this means it's too much government. And so what we want is less government.
Yes, I agree with that.
Then you have individual people who are living their lives who feel like they are getting treated unfairly by big corporations. And what do they want? They want more regulations to protect them. And I think, well, how do you find a middle ground here? And I think for me, the answer I give is you need to have regulations, but what you shouldn't have is the enforcement agencies of those regulatory agencies going out there and hurting small businesses because they are struggling to comply with something. Help them to comply. Don't find creative ways to prosecute them. Just help them to comply. And if they can't, then you go back to the minister and say, hey, there's a problem here. This regulation's having an unintended consequence. Let's change it. It shouldn't be an adversarial relationship between government and people. And unfortunately, it is.
I would like to, before we finish our program, I would like to, about Kamala Harris. I remember the old joke by Jackie Mason, remember, when George Bush Sr. was the president. So he was always saying, I start my every day praying for George Bush, for his health. And somebody asked him why. He says, because he protects us from Dan Quayle. So this is about Kamala Harris. With that, I would like to thank you very much for today's program. And hope to see you same place, same time next Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And have a great week of trading. Have a great weekend. All the best to you.
Good to see you again, Shaquille.
Hang around, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Yeah. Hold on a second while I get ready to.